Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive into something I think we can all relate to, hiccups.
You got that right.
They're usually just a minor annoyance,
Okay.
but we found this really cool article titled A Comprehensive Understanding of Hiccups. And I'm already learning a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I think you'll be surprised too by just how much is going on when you get those hiccups.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
So, uh, ready to unravel the mystery of hiccups?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's start with the basics then.
Sure.
What exactly aids a hiccup?
Well, it's more than just a muscle spasm. It's actually a reflex arc.
Reflex arc.
Yeah, a three-part process that involves your nervous system, your brain, and your muscles all working together.
Hmm. That sounds a little intense for something as silly as a hiccup.
Well, think of it like this. Have you ever been to the doctor and they tap on your knee with that little hammer?
Oh, yeah, and your leg
Yeah.
just flies up. Right. That's a reflex arc. Something triggers the nerves in your knee, sends a signal to your spinal cord, and then sends a signal right back to your leg muscles, making them contract.
Okay, so is the same thing happening with hiccups?
Exactly. But instead of your knee, it starts in your diaphragm, or your stomach, or your esophagus.
Okay.
And then those nerves send a message up to your brain, and the brain fires back, causing your diaphragm to contract suddenly.
Ah, so that contraction is what's making that hic sound.
Yeah, precisely. That hic is actually the sound of your vocal cord snapping shut because of that sudden diaphragm spasm.
Wow. So it's like this whole chain reaction going on. The article mentions that certain neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin play a role in regulating hiccups. What's that about?
Well, that's where it gets really fascinating because it suggests that hiccups aren't just a simple mechanical reflex, but are actually tied to complex brain chemistry. Neurotransmitters are like chemical messengers in your brain, and they influence all sorts of functions, things like mood, sleep, even how our bodies respond to stimuli.
So our emotions could actually be affecting our hiccups.
Well, it's possible. It's definitely an area where we need to do more research, but uh, we're learning more all the time. Like, some researchers believe that disruptions in dopamine levels could explain why certain medications, especially those used to treat Parkinson's disease, sometimes trigger hiccups as a side effect.
Huh. I never would have thought of that. So we've got this whole reflex arc happening and neurotransmitters are involved, but what actually sets it off in the first place? What causes hiccups? I know from experience that sometimes a big meal can do it.
You're right, overeating, especially foods that cause bloating, is a very common hiccup trigger.
Makes sense.
When you think about it, your stomach is getting stretched and distended, and it's probably sending signals up to the brain, like, hey, things are getting a bit crowded in here.
It's like a little distress signal from your stomach. So basically, anything that irritates or distends your stomach can lead to hiccups.
That's right. That's why carbonated drinks, swallowing air, even sudden temperature changes can all cause them.
Oh man, tell me about it. I remember one time I was jogging on a super hot day and I chugged a huge glass of ice water. I swear I hiccuped for like 5 minutes straight.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah.
And those are just the common triggers.
Right.
Sometimes hiccups can be a sign of something more serious going on.
Really? I always thought hiccups were pretty harmless.
Well, most of the time they are. But if you're getting hiccups that last for more than 48 hours, what we call persistent or intractable hiccups, those can sometimes be a sign of an underlying medical condition.
Okay, now I'm a little concerned. Like, what kinds of conditions are we talking about here?
Well, for example, GERD, or gastroesophageal reflux disease, which is when stomach acid flows back up into the esophagus.
Right.
It can cause irritation and, you guessed it, hiccups.
So those persistent hiccups could be your body's way of saying something's not right.
Yeah, exactly. And in some rarer cases, persistent hiccups could be linked to things like central nervous system disorders, certain types of infections, or even metabolic issues.
Wow, I had no idea hiccups could be so complicated.
They can be. It's important to remember that most hiccups are benign and resolve on their own. It's only when they persist for an extended time or are accompanied by other symptoms that you really need to be concerned.
This is why we do these deep dives. You never know what you're going to learn. So if you're having those never-ending hiccups, what should you do?
Well, don't panic, but don't ignore them either.
Right.
Talk to your doctor, especially if you have any other symptoms along with the hiccups.
Good advice. It's always better to be safe than sorry. Okay, so we've covered what hiccups are, what causes them, and when to worry. But now for the fun part, what about all those crazy home remedies people swear by?
Oh, yeah.
Holding your breath, drinking water upside down, spooning sugar. Do any of those actually work?
Well, that's where things get a little tricky.
Uh,
You see, there's no shortage of anecdotal evidence, but the scientific jury is still out on most of these home remedies.
oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, some people might find relief from them, but there's no real proof that they're effective for everyone.
So it's kind of a mixed bag. Some might work, some might not.
Right. And that brings up an interesting question.
What's that?
If most of these remedies don't have any real scientific basis, why do so many people believe in them? Why have they persisted for generations?
Well, that is a good question. I guess that's a story for another time, right?
You got it. We got a lot more to uncover in this deep dive.
Yeah, it looks like we do. So before we went off on that tangent, we were about to get into the history and cultural side of hiccups.
Right.
Seems like something so basic would have some interesting stories attached to it.
Oh, absolutely. You know, hiccups have been around as long as humans have.
Right.
So naturally, they've popped up in all sorts of folklore and cultural beliefs throughout history.
So give us some examples, like what did people think caused hiccups way back in the day?
Well, in a lot of cultures, hiccups were thought to be caused by supernatural forces,
Mm.
like evil spirits or demons.
Outback.
And there were all sorts of rituals and incantations that were supposed to drive these spirits away and stop the hiccups.
Oh, spooky. So they thought like a demon was stuck in your throat or something.
Pretty much. And, these beliefs weren't limited to any specific region or time period. You find versions of them all over the world. For example, in parts of Europe, they thought hiccups were caused by a mischievous fairy or goblin that was sitting on your shoulder.
So I guess the cure was to like make your shoulder less appealing to fairies.
Exactly. And some of these old folk remedies were pretty creative.
Okay, do tell.
Well, one that I thought was pretty interesting was you had to drink water from the rim of a cup while you plugged your ears and nostrils.
Wait a minute, didn't you say earlier that there's like a modern day straw that uses pressure to stop hiccups?
Yeah,
So it's kind of like the same idea.
it is. And you know what?
Hmm.
Turns out that straw is actually based on an ancient Roman remedy.
Ooh.
Yeah, Pliny the Elder, he was like this Roman scholar and naturalist. He recommended this very technique for curing hiccups.
Wow. So this modern invention might actually be rooted in ancient wisdom. That's amazing. Talk about coming full circle.
Makes you wonder what other hidden gems we might find if we look back into history a little more.
Yeah.
But beyond those supernatural explanations, there were also some more practical theories about hiccups in the past.
Oh, like what?
Well, Hippocrates, who's considered the father of Western medicine, believed that hiccups were caused by an imbalance of humors in the body, specifically an excess of heat in the stomach.
Ah, the classic four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. It's really amazing how long that theory stuck around.
It really is.
Mhm.
And even though we know now that the four humors theory is incorrect, it's really interesting to see how people tried to make sense of the world back then.
Absolutely. It shows that we've always been curious about how our bodies work, even if we didn't always have the right answers. But let's get back to those home remedies. We talked about the pressure technique, but there are so many other ones out there.
Yeah, tons. Holding your breath, drinking a glass of water really fast, biting on a lemon, swallowing a spoonful of sugar.
It seems like everyone has their own go-to hiccup cure. But you were saying earlier that a lot of these remedies don't have any scientific evidence to back them up.
That's right. While some people say these methods work for them, there's no real proof that they work consistently for everyone. Which begs the question,
Which is?
if these home remedies aren't really based on science, why do so many people swear by them?
Yeah.
Like, why have they been around for so long?
That's a good question. I wonder if it's kind of like the placebo effect. You know, if you believe that something will work, it sometimes
I
does.
think that's definitely part of it. But I think it goes even deeper than that. Remember, hiccups are often unpredictable and don't last very long. They usually go away on their own.
Yeah.
So people might just assume that whatever they were doing when the hiccups stopped is what made them go away.
Right, like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You do something, and the hiccups just stop on their own, and then you think, aha, it worked.
Exactly. And it's easy to see how these remedies get passed down through families and become a part of their culture, even if they aren't actually doing much.
And plus, there's that social aspect of it. Sometimes just doing something, even if it's just a silly superstition, it can make you feel better when you're annoyed by hiccups,
Exactly.
like a distraction. So we've debunked some myths about hiccup remedies, but are there any that actually have some scientific backing?
Well, there is one that has shown some promise in studies,
Okay.
and it's not as crazy as it might sound. It's called vagal maneuvers.
Vagal. What?
The vagus nerve is this long nerve that runs from your brain all the way down to your abdomen.
Oh, okay.
And stimulating this nerve can sometimes interrupt the hiccup reflex.
Okay, so how do you stimulate the vagus nerve? Is it like a massage for your insides or something?
Not quite. There are a few techniques.
Mm-hmm.
One of the simplest ones is something called the Valsalva maneuver.
Okay.
It's basically holding your breath and bearing down, like when you're trying to have a bowel movement.
Okay, I can see why you said it wasn't as crazy as it sounds.
Right.
Okay, what else?
Another technique is gently massaging the carotid artery in your neck. But that one you should really only do under the guidance of a healthcare professional.
Okay, so there are some options out there, even if they might not be the most fun. But I want to shift gears a bit and talk about something we touched on earlier, like the more serious side of hiccups.
Okay.
You mentioned that persistent hiccups can sometimes be a sign of an underlying medical condition.
Yeah.
So what kind of things are we talking about here?
Well, we already talked about GERD, but there are a lot of other possibilities. Problems with your central nervous system, like a brain tumor, stroke, or meningitis, can sometimes cause persistent hiccups.
Oh, wow. That's definitely something you don't want to mess around with.
Nope. And then you also have things that affect your metabolic system, like diabetes or kidney failure. Those can sometimes trigger hiccups, too.
So anything that messes with how your body normally functions could potentially lead to persistent hiccups.
That's a good way to put it, and it's why it's so important to pay attention to what your body is telling you and talk to your doctor if something feels off.
It's true. This has been really eye-opening. I had no idea hiccups could be so complicated. It feels like we've just scratched the surface.
You're right. There's definitely a lot more to explore. But this seems like a good place to stop for now.
Okay.
When we come back, we'll wrap up our deep dive into hiccups with some final thoughts.
Sounds good to me. We'll be right back.
And we're back. Welcome back to our deep dive into hiccups. We've learned a lot about those pesky little hic sounds.
Yeah, we've gone from the science behind them to all the weird folklore surrounding them.
It's crazy to think something so common can be so complex.
It just shows you how much there is to discover about the human body, even those things we usually take for granted. So as we wrap things up, what are some of the main points our listeners should remember?
Well, the most important thing is to remember that most of the time, hiccups are totally harmless and don't last long.
Okay.
They're a normal bodily response and usually go away on their own pretty quickly.
So no need to worry if you get them now and then.
Right. But if they last for more than 48 hours,
Right?
or if you have any other weird symptoms along with them,
Right.
then it's definitely a good idea to see your doctor.
You know, better safe than sorry. Right.
Absolutely. Another important thing to keep in mind is that while there are a ton of home remedies out there, there's not much science to back them up.
So all those tricks, like drinking water upside down, they might not work as well as people say.
Yeah, some people might get relief, but there's no proof they'll work for everyone.
But I get why people try those remedies, though. Hiccups can be so annoying.
Oh, for sure.
And it feels like you have some control when you try to do something about them.
Exactly. Plus, people have been using those remedies for generations, so there's a certain comfort level there.
It's all part of being human, you know? We try to find answers and fix things, even for the little stuff.
That's right. This whole deep dive has made me realize just how much we still don't understand about hiccups.
It's true. We've talked about a lot, but there are still so many unanswered questions, like why do some people seem to get hiccups so easily?
Right. And why do they last for days or even weeks sometimes? There's just so much we still need to figure out.
I guess it just shows that even with all our medical advancements, there are still mysteries out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And remember what we were talking about with that straw for hiccups?
The one based on that old Roman remedy.
Exactly. Sometimes ancient wisdom holds the key to solving today's medical puzzles.
It's pretty cool to think about.
It just goes to show it's good to keep an open mind and remember that both science and traditional knowledge are important.
Very well said. Well, I think it's time for us to say goodbye to the world of hiccups. For now, at least.
But hopefully not forever. Who knows what amazing discoveries are waiting out there?
Well, I feel a lot more knowledgeable about hiccups. And maybe a little less annoyed the next time I get them.
And a little bit more appreciative of how amazing the human body is.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of hiccups. We'll see you next time.